Welcome to Keep the Hotel Empty. I'm your host, Eric Paul. In studio today, we are grateful to welcome in dear friend of the show, the one and only Dennis Brok. In this episode, Dennis shares and expands on various insights about the afterlife. Dennis draws on his life experiences and the things he's learned reading nearly 30 books in the 12 months prior to this interview. Please enjoy. Welcome to Keep the Hotel Empty. Today we've kept the hotel empty to welcome back our good friend Dennis Brok. Today Dennis is going to talk to us about some of the books he's read across the last year and expound on some interesting ideas and see where we go from there. So Dennis, welcome back. We're very happy to have you.
Well, I'm very pleased to be here. And I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about first because I have a lot of subjects that are, I guess, controversial.
Well, that's why we had to have you back. You're our first person to come back, so I'm stoked on that. We had more to talk about when we let you go the first time.
Yeah, I did feel like it was an unfinished conversation. And I've been through a reading phase, like artists have their blue periods. And
Yeah.
I've had different things. I had a teepee period where I studied everything about Native Americans and built a teepee and put it on my front lawn. But I've always been a book person.
Right.
And a book has always been my companion when there were no companions. And then it became a guitar, fortunately, but it started off with books. And I wanted to tackle the most, what is the biggest question of all?
Well, of course, where do we go when we die?
Yes. Well, what are we doing here? Where do we go? And when I was quite young, I used to try to initiate a spark of thought in people by saying to them, where were you before you were born? And I didn't know that I was touching upon it. And I didn't bring the Tibetan Book of the Dead, but I wanted to talk about the Tibetan Book of the Dead. For some reason, out of all the world's great philosophies and religion, and Tibetan Buddhism is not a religion. It doesn't have a deity in the sense that religions have this need to put one person up on a hill and worship them. It's the mystic thing. The Tibetan Buddhists, they're more into a philosophy, which show me, and I can make sense of it. And what I've discovered is that their view, on what happens when you die is the closest to reality of any of the major religions. And I've decided that by extensive reading, and I mean 24 books with associated ideas, and I've taken the cream of those books and brought them in here.
Awesome. Do you think that the lack of a central deity it directly attributes to that, or that's just like a coincidence, for lack of a better term?
There is a need in people to keep it simple. I don't know what it is. But when you make it too complicated for them, you lose them.
Right.
And I'm not sure, again, why that is. The Mayans could, the Mayans could calculate the year for the planet Venus down to the 4 decimal points. They could go, it's 365 point blah, 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 4, okay?
Right.
They can't do it now. Are they the same people? Were they helped? By the way, the Mayan calendar is 23 years different than the Hebrew calendar. Both 5747, 5723, 23, 24 years difference between the Mayan calendar and the Jewish calendar, which goes back almost 6,000 years.
Right.
So as I was approaching the age where we wonder if we were immortal or was that just an illusion, I began to wonder what exactly does happen. And I remember when I was quite young, and we experimented with a lot of heavy drugs when I was younger, and you could say I tripped out pretty badly one time and felt as though I had gone over to the other side. And I remember coming out of that with my mind even more blown than usual at the time and thinking, you're not supposed to know. The thing that kept coming to my head, you're not supposed to know this stuff yet. And there's a form of amnesia in people that kicks in. And I want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Like this book here Compelling evidence from children who remember past lives. Children's past lives, life after life, beyond the ashes. Now, this is interesting. The concept here, through time into healing. And Brian Weiss is a brilliant writer. I have 2 books of his, Many Lives, Many Masters. When he got people, 2 or 3 of these people were hypnotists, and they used hypnotism to take people back in time, and it's very complicated, but the truth is actually more comforting than the dogma. The truth is that we are old souls. Many of us have been reincarnated over and over and over again for thousands of years, and that memory has been wiped out by the time we're 5 years old. Many children still remember. But there is a phenomenon that we had to be aware of here, and it strangles everybody. Mm-hmm. I actually got some of this from the Red Book, which talks about aliens, and I want to talk about that next time. Human beings, when they're presented with something that challenges their beliefs, they shut down.
Yes.
They shut down. Nothing happens above the neck. Dead. And I saw this. First, because I saw a flying saucer. I saw a UFO when I was younger, and I dragged somebody out of the car and said, look at that, and they couldn't see it. They couldn't register in their head. They didn't realize what they were looking at.
Right.
Why? Who knows? But that struck me almost as much as seeing the flying saucer. So I wanted to know what happens to people. And I had the feeling that there was evidence out there, and there is. Of all these books, here, let me see if I can read you just a couple pages, a couple sentences. I find that this book talks about this book. Talks about a trip he's taking in the middle. Here, let me do this quickly for you because it's very important.
Yeah, no problem.
A Western traveler hired a car and driver in northern India. Wow, that's not the part. Okay. His name is Ian Stevenson. They're in the middle of the desert somewhere driving in a truck, and they're in the middle of nowhere. And he is a physician and a psychiatrist who has been braving roads like this, picture themselves in Afghanistan or someplace, and worse, for 37 years to bring back reports of young children who speak of remembering previous lives and provide detailed and accurate information about people who died before they were born, people they say they once were. While I struggle with my fear of dying, he is wrestling with his own fear of annihilation. He was worried about the road at the time.
Yeah.
That his life's work will end, largely ignored by his peers. Why, he asked for the 3rd time since night had fallen. Do mainstream scientists refuse to accept the evidence we have for reincarnation? On this day and for the past 6 months, Stevenson had shown me what he means by evidence. He has permitted me to accompany him on field trips, first to the hills surrounding Beirut, and now on a wild swath of India. He has responded to my endless questions and even invited me to participate in interviews that are at the heart of his research. The evidence he is referring to does not come from fashionable New Age sources, past life readings, or hypnotic regressions during which subjects talk about being a Florentine bride in the 16th century or a soldier in the Napoleonic Wars, rendering the kind of details one might garner in an hour's paging through a few romance novels. The details Stevenson's children recall are far more homely and more specific than those. One man remembers being a teenager called Sheila was hit by a car crossing the road to collect grass for cattle feed. Another recalls the life of a young man who died of tuberculosis asking for his brother. A third remembers being a woman waiting for heart surgery in Virginia and trying and failing to call her daughter before the operation she would not survive. It goes on and on. The children supply names of towns and relatives, occupations, relationships, attitudes, and emotions, and in hundreds of cases around the world are unique to a single dead individual, often apparently unknown to their present families. But the fact is, the people the children remember did exist. The memories that the children claim can be checked against real lives, and their alleged fears of identification verified or contradicted by a variety of witnesses. This is the book that he's talking about. He's not talking about his own book. He's talking about the work of Ian Stevenson. 2,000 interviews, mostly across the third world. It just worked better there. They weren't told by their parents they can't believe in reincarnation, they're going to go to hell.
Right.
That's the problem. Okay, our ears are stuffed up with dogma. We can't think right. You know what the first religion really was? It wasn't a religion. It was a recognition that Dad died 2 days ago. How come I can still hear him? How come I can still smell him? How come I still sense him? More primitive people were more in touch with that kind of thing. They were connected to it much more than we are. We have allowed our intelligence to interfere with our wisdom.
Right.
And this man traveled, and this is a scientifically laid out book where he pretty much confirms that there is such a thing.
Where do you see the fork in the road in any of the timelines where we're giving up what we know for what we think, more or less?
I worry that they can't live without their crutch. Their crutch is their religion. And the problem is the middlemen are the problem. And what do I mean by that? God's messenger.
Right.
The guy who talks to God. The guy who wears funny clothes. The guy who asks me for money every Sunday. The guy who tells me I'm going to go to hell if I don't do what he says.
Right.
That guy is the problem, not God.
Right.
The interloper, the middleman, the one who's trying to take advantage of the fact that we are programmed to believe. We are programmed. There's a thing called the God gene. I don't know if you know much about it. But here we have books, children's past lives, over and over and over again. What happens is that many of these children remember things they're not supposed to remember, and they said, well, I had a different mommy before, or I lived somewhere else, or I don't like this food. I like the food I used to get.
Right.
You see that stuff a lot. And then by the time they're 5 years old, that memory has disappeared, and the normal amnesia sets in that we must have. We have to have amnesia because how many times did you die? What did you go through? What did it feel like? You want to remember that? Hell no. You don't want to remember that. So we're programmed not to remember, but it's there. The misconception was for years that we only use 10% of our brain. Actually, we use about a third of it at any one time, from what I can tell. But what's the rest of it doing?
Right.
Now, let's introduce you to some people.
Yeah.
Ray Moody. Ray Moody was the one who came up with the term near-death experience, and what a lot of people have had. Now, from what I can tell, a near-death experience is exactly that. You're not quite there, but the body doesn't die like a light switch.
Right.
The chemicals are still in there. They're still firing. The soul may have not left yet. Many times when somebody is in pain, the soul leaves ahead of time and is floating around the room watching everything going on, watching the efforts to keep them alive, watching everybody grieve, watching everybody cry, and they say, hey, it's okay. It's okay. I'm up here. I'm all right. There is an afterlife. I will see you again. What I've learned from these books is that you travel through infinity with the same people. That's comforting. We don't need to be lied to. The truth is that when you see somebody, it's like, wow, that really clicked. That really clicked.
Yeah.
Well, it did. It did.
Well, that's almost there's no such thing as coincidence line of thinking. If people can recognize that stuff as a click instead of some type of
why do we shut it down?
meaningless.
But we shut it down. We shut it down.
Yeah, we shut it down.
We were told to shut it down. We've been indoctrinated to shut it down.
What do you think the reason is for that? Who benefited from that? What was the reason for that?
Organized
Especially if at
religion.
one point we weren't doing that.
Organized religion.
Yeah.
If you were to look at an original sin, it's organized religion. It's not believing in God or superior beings or higher forms of life or that we are part of a greater. We are all of us part of one living organism. So we can't hurt another person without in a way hurting ourselves.
Right.
And the Buddhists understand that, but people don't. And there are some books here that are so heavy that I hesitate to recommend them to people. This being one of them. Cases of Reincarnation from the Holocaust. This guy's a rabbi. Mm-hmm. And he put it out there that he was looking for children who remembered being alive before in a past life. And in regular Judaism, they don't believe in reincarnation, but the Hasidics do. And in the Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism, they believe in it. And in fact, the original church believed in it, but they had this little thing called the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, where they decided what would be official Christian doctrine and what would not. And what would not fell into a category of who do we kill? Because they only had one way of thinking back then. You were either on our side or you're dead.
Right.
Okay, 1492 is a great example of that. There's comparisons between what was done to the American Indians and the Maya and the Inca, the Aztec, and what was done to the Jews. In this book, the rabbi says, there was a tremendous disturbance in the force in 1945. And it was the death of all those children. That's in here. Hard as hell to read.
I can't even imagine.
The kids who lived through that. When he tells this crowd, he gets a crowd of people. He says, there aren't enough Jewish mothers, Jewish families, for these Jewish kids to be born into Jewish families.
Right.
So they're going to be born into Gentile families. And then over and over and over again, he gets these people, hundreds of cases of these kids who want to be Jewish for some reason. They weren't raised that way.
Right.
Okay, but they wanted to be Jewish. And these kids have these fears. When you go back, as in many of these cases will tell you, when you're able to go back into a past life, you're able to find out why you have that fear will go away. It's therapeutic. Being able to recognize what happened to you in a past life is just as therapeutic as knowing what happened to you when you were a baby or a little kid. And these little kids talk about black boots. Mm-hmm. Okay? So that's
I've actually seen
dark as hell.
I've actually seen some interviews with people who can, like you said, they can describe sounds and scenes of places in that era that they obviously never were.
Well, many of these people are empathic. You know, they sense everything in the room. They sense, I'm empathic. I can't be in front of somebody who's upset without being upset for them.
Yeah.
But that's a marvelous feature. You know, but I wanted to introduce you to another concept. The guy who wrote that, this is another book by Ray Moody, was incredible. He built, there's a thing called scrying. Have you ever heard of scrying?
I haven't.
Okay, scrying is when you look into a mirror. They used to use black obsidian mirrors for this, and they're looking for the spirits to come out through the mirror. Now, there's another word called a psychomendium. Now, a psychomendium means theater of the mind. Now, Moody, that's what this is about. He built one. He built a psychomendium based on the ancient Greek designs of where you go to talk to the dead. The theater of the mind. His theory was, and I believe this to be true, there's a thing called the Akashic record.
Oh, yes, I'm well familiar with that.
All right, well, how do you tap into the Akashic? He's saying that everybody has the ability to tap into the Akashic record.
Right, and actually, funny you should bring that up, because I was recently talking to an artist.
Is it fair?
Yeah, actually I should say, all too appropriate that you bring that up. But I was talking to an artist recently about their writer's block, and I said I liken it to being able to tap into that Akashic record. Right. Because if you can be quiet enough, all of that stuff is already written, it's already put in there. If you can just have your antenna, it will just come out. And I was trying to help them quiet their mind enough so everything that was already there could be processed. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
it is a matter of quieting the mind. And the psychomendium is a small room that is completely dark. And you're sitting in a comfortable chair, and there's a mirror. And the mirror is not reflecting you, it's reflecting off into the void. And what Ray Moody would do, he had a place to do this at where it was in the woods and it had a beautiful lake. anyone who came to his home to use the psychomendium to try to communicate with and basically they weren't communicating with the dead. They were but they were using their own brain to do it. Their brain was the mechanism that was creating those images, but it was creating images that they could identify with and images that they understood and images that healed them. And he put them through a couple hours of conditioning before they went into that room. They would walk around the grounds. They would commune with nature. They would listen to beautiful music. They would, in my case, I'd be playing music. They do whatever relaxes them. They would bring whatever reminds them of that person. They would think about that person. They would get 100% immersed in this experience before they ever walked into this little black room. And they'd sit in a comfortable chair and just let it go. And at that point, they are trying to dial in to that record.
Right.
And how it pertains to them specifically. And these other books, this is what I'm reading right now, Destiny of Souls, this is its companion piece. This is the most amazing stuff at all. Because either you have to accept that it's true or that it's not. I mean, how many flying saucers does it take for it to be real?
That's a good question.
How many kids who tell you accurate information of a life they lived before does it take? Accurate, provable.
Well, regrettably, it seems like the answer to that could be infinite because there's always some way to scapegoat it as woo or other such
The tendency to
hallucination.
do so is prevailing. The tendency to discourage the belief in these things is so strong
Right.
that all they need is religious dogma to help them along and they're on their way. I see nothing. It's a Sergeant Schultz philosophy. So I hear nothing, I see nothing, I know nothing.
Right.
Just tell me where to go.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I don't care. I just work here.
Well, when I die, it's over, right?
Yeah.
Right? Right?
If it were only that easy.
Right. But the Tibetan Buddhists tell you when you die, you got to face all this. When you read these books, when you die, you got to face all this. You're shown everything you did. And you have to you are your own hell.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
And I remember thinking this when I was very, very young. I would think hell is a personal thing. It's something when you realize what you did wrong.
Yes.
And over again, these two books by Michael Newton talk about that, and it's marvelous. It is incredibly hard to believe, and yet, again, if it's true of one, it's true of everyone.
Right, and this is something that I agree with as well, or I think must be true. And I kind of want to circle back to the NDEs. What do you think accounts for the universal similarities of people's NDEs, regardless of their religious or lack of religious backgrounds? What do you think attributes to the fact that they almost all tell the same story?
A scientist always looks for commonalities.
Right.
A scientist always looks for common denominators. He doesn't give a damn about one case.
Right.
He looks at prevalence. He looks at tendencies. He looks at, my God, I saw it over here. I saw it over there. I saw it over there. God damn it, it's true.
Yeah, what has to
That's
be common
this.
here? Yeah.
All of this has led me to the inescapable conclusion that we have. An old soul is an old soul. When you see a kid, you say that's an old, yeah, you know what? You're right. There's a lot of things people don't understand, and I want to talk about it on another time, is that we've been interfered with over and over again by alien life, and even they want to know what happens to you when you die.
Well, was it you and I that were having the discussion about the 1,000-year gap we had in progress?
Oh, my God. Okay, so two aliens walk into a bar, okay?
Yeah.
And they look human, right? They look like insurance agents or something to that. And one says, yeah, so tell me, I mean, we've had civilization on our planet just as long as they have. Why aren't they further ahead? Oh. And he said, well, first of all, they took an oversexed chimpanzee and made him super smart. That's the first problem they made. You know, oh, my God. What were we talking about? Where were we off?
The 1,000 years we didn't do anything.
Yes. You know what's funny about this? The people who come back, they come back, how long does that period lasts between when you die, you come back in another body? Well, further back in history you go, the more that's an extended time. And under certain circumstances, it may only be a year, it may only be a few months before they come back reincarnated again. But during the Dark Ages, people didn't come back for 1,000 years. Two aliens walk into a bar. Why aren't these people further ahead? What? One word. Christianity, Dark Ages. Every single creative endeavor across the board had to be related to the birth of Jesus.
Right.
Every single one. And if you take it all apart, and if you read what they believe, the Council of Nicaea was partially created to try to explain, well, is Jesus the Son of God, or is he God, or is he was he just created out of nothing, or was he part of this? Or
This was a bait and switch. What do we get here?
It was. If you read, go to Wikipedia and look at the Council of Nicaea, and you'll read, and they're using words that nobody understands the meaning of, which is part of the routine. Okay?
Yeah, of course.
This is what modern medicine does. This is what law does.
I was going to say, this is legalese.
Same thing. You use terms nobody gets. No, it's not. It's not at all odd that the original Bible that was printed, the Gutenberg, was printed in Latin so that the average person couldn't read it. They were getting back to that same thing again. Who's in charge? Who owns God? Who owns God? I have the rights to God. You want to get to him, you got to come through me. You know what? They actually say that.
Gatekeeping.
They actually say that. If you want to get to God, you got to go through me.
Right.
That's a shakedown.
Yeah.
Okay?
It certainly is.
That's a shakedown. And Paul was the one who created Christianity, from what I can tell, and he never met Jesus. There is no historical witness to Jesus. It doesn't exist. It was all a combination of Hellenistic, they call it, meaning Greek stories, Old Testament stories, and mysticism thrown all together, embellished upon generation after generation. Like 200 or 300 years go by and he's Superman. And maybe the problem is that we don't know the truth, which is that we should be acknowledging the people who came before us, the people who died, the people we know were real. We don't know that some big guy in a white beard, why would it be sitting in off of the set? No, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
I mean, our relatives existed. They watch over us. If you haven't noticed that, then I feel sorry for you.
Well, see, and that's kind of where my question is a little bit rooted in that. You know, we have all of these dogmatic things where we've filled in the blank and we're believing it on hearsay and thousands of years of the telephone game. And then we have things like this where we have a couple thousand interviews done relatively contemporaneously that all say the same thing.
And he did it scientifically.
That's what I'm saying. So it's a weird point of dissonance between dogma and things like this. That
So do we believe in the God, Gene, and think that these people have to worship? They have to worship a superior being?
Yeah, right. Well, that's the thing.
That's a question, though.
Yeah. That's the operative question.
Yes, and not only that, but the person who came up with that God genes thing said it's hereditary. It's a familial tendency to believe. I got to believe. The truth is that we owe our ancestors, people who came before us. I don't even want to use the word as it sounds too foreign. Our relatives, our people. We owe them respect. We owe them recognition, and we must be aware that. Like the Jews, when they have a baby, they name the baby after a dead person, so that person can still be there in some respect, and it's an honor. Well, it might be more than that. So many times, these kids are born into the same families. Many times they're born into the same towns. Many times it's a town like 50 miles away. And when you read Stevenson, a lot of these people were born just within an hour of where the person died. And the question of how long do they stay around and what happens to them when they are in between lives is the real mystery.
Right.
But Michael Newton, he's the best hypnotist on the planet. Apparently, these people have these stories that you just have to read.
Right.
Because they're incredible. You have a group of people you travel with throughout eternity, like I said, and they repeat their roles. So they're not the same role each time. They may even be different sex next time around. It's like, but they're the same soul. And by reading this one, I came to understand something very earth-shattering for me. I had a relationship before, and my diagnosis upon leaving was that she was a malignant narcissist. And I had children from an earlier marriage, and I had to watch them behave in the most unusual way because I was quite kind to them, and I'm estranged from them now. And I had to put that together in my head. How the hell did that really happen?
Right.
And I was able to do it to a certain extent because many generations women have been taking drugs while they're pregnant, especially during the 50s. Mm-hmm. They were all taking speed. They discovered methadone and dexedrine in the 50s, and they went crazy on it.
I didn't know that.
It's true. And so a lot of these things, you get you're a soul. You're put into a new body. You are then limited to and restricted to whatever that body wants to do to you. That body at that point becomes your jail or your heaven or your home. And what I've discovered, the people who disassociate from what they do, as a malignant narcissist, will tend to disassociate what they do.
Absolutely.
It isn't that they're lying so much as that they have disconnected themselves from it. You are seeing their duality between the body they've inherited, which comes with physiological problems, brain chemistry problems. Who the hell knows? Mama did alcohol, mama smoked cigarettes, mama did speed.
Yeah.
And they have that body that they are stuck with. And there may be a conflict between the soul, which may be decent, and the body, which may be corrupted. And what you see that leads to a disassociation, where they do something and then they say they didn't do it, or they act like they didn't do it. You can't get them to admit what they did.
Right.
They are disassociating themselves. That's a war between their soul and their body. The body's limited. And when you get rid of it, and you're in the between, you can get a whole new body, but your basic soul's the same, but you're restricted to what that body went through. And if you listen to this, some people pick bodies intentionally in the between. They say you can pick what's going to happen to you, and you give yourself a challenge. They purposely pick bodies that are a challenge so that they can become more enlightened. This is a Buddhist way of thinking, right down Tibetan Buddhist, right there, right? So they can become better, so they can raise their consciousness, because the whole purpose of all of this is to raise our consciousness, to become superior beings. It isn't, and a lot of people who come back in the middle, they don't want to go back again. They're lazy. And they're shown what they did every day of their life until they get it. And you know what hell is? Hell is being isolated. Hell is when you go to the between and you're stuck in a classroom trying to learn what you did wrong. And I'm serious. He actually describes it as a classroom, where they have books like in 3D, and you can look at everything you did in your life until you get it, what you did wrong. And you're isolated. Everybody else is traveling around with their soulmates, so people they've been going through reincarnation after reincarnation. They come back, they see the same people each time. And it's like Hold Home Week. It's like,
right.
Some of them, because if you had a really hard life, they'll congratulate, they'll applaud, because you had such a really hard life. That's why suicide, if you do it arbitrarily, yes, it's wrong. If you did it because you're in pain, it's not. And they get that.
Right.
There's nothing but forgiveness and love up there.
And that's one of the universal NDE characteristics.
Without the religion.
Right.
There's forgiveness and love without religion.
No fantastical thought required.
No membership fee.
Yeah.
No little car you carry around with you. No sense of superiority because they don't believe what you do.
Well, I happen to, just as an aside, and I think we might have talked about this, but gives some credence to this. I have a visual impairment. I'm legally blind, colorblind. I've never driven a car, all that good stuff. I wear contacts that are specially made for me that are a lens inside of a lens.
Costs a fortune.
And then I wear glasses over the top of it to correct my constant double vision.
Oh, so you correct it twice.
Glasses. Yeah, these are just prism. There's no correction in it for the clarity's sake. And I've had it my whole life, and it's, of course, been sometimes a challenge, sometimes a gift. And my way of reconciling it before I was older and able to deal with things in other ways was I somehow always felt like wherever I was before here, I must have said, when you put me back, I don't want to see. I don't want to see everything. I want to be able to do this without my eyes.
You're at a higher level than other people.
Well, I don't know about that, but...
That you can request that, because these books say you can.
Yeah, and that was something I thought of when I was a little kid, and I had nobody was telling me.
But you're not sliding through life.
No, I'm definitely not sliding through life. I don't think I'd be happy if I was.
But it is possible for people to choose to slide through life, but they don't find it very gratifying.
No. And my other anecdotal thing is my son, basically up until the time he was about 5, he would talk about having been a doctor, and when he became a doctor at 35, and he would describe it in really seemingly ludicrous specifics. And now he's 13, and
Doesn't remember it, does he?
he only remembers us talking about it because it was so
by talking to him.
right. It was so flabbergasting because I'll never forget it. The first time he did it, he was like 2, and he was still not speaking all that clearly. And he just shouts from the back seat, "Dad, remember when I was a doctor? I was 35."
That's right out of these books. It's right out of okay, so that's what makes it real. That it keeps occurring. It's not a coincidence. It keeps occurring. When something just keeps showing up and across the board and in different cultures, you got to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
And you got to get over the fact that you may not believe it.
It causes some massive cognitive dissonance.
Oh, it's rough, but we are conditioned not to believe in the fantastic. I don't know why. There's a comment in the Red Book, which is supposedly about alien life. It's a very controversial book that says, I think it's supposed to be an alien speaking when he says the humans, when they don't get something, they're so easy to catch. When they're confused, they're just so easy. You know, they just, yeah, come on, nothing.
Yeah.
We got to get over that. We're living in a big universe. We have been visited many, many, many times.
So what do you think is holding back people from seeing some of these things as legitimate
Fear.
instead of just fringe?
It's fear. Fear put there. Fear. If you tell anybody you're doing any of this, a good percentage of them start thinking you're in league with the devil.
Yeah.
And you're back to explaining to them that there is no such thing. That you are the devil, lady, when you think that way. You're limiting yourself. You know, you really are. I mean, these people have to have their dogma. They have to have it like a kid has to have that security blanket. They don't feel like they can go through life with what they have been given as information, which is nothing about what really happens to you when you die. They've been not allowed to view that. They've been prohibited from any venturing into that realm. And they are accused of being Satanists, and they would burn them about the stake in 1600. They burned 20 women, by the way, in Salem.
Or maybe floated or not. We don't know.
Yeah, that's funny.
So
true. Yeah.
when you see stuff like this, what do you think? I mean, other than the fear, because some of the juxtapose to this is the fear is there, and these indoctrinations and these dogmas are there to help us feel some kind of safety in the gaps where we can't say definitively what happens. But like you touched on before, if you can start to try to open your mind maybe a little bit to seemingly contrarian ways of thinking, you might actually find some more real grounded safety in something that might be true instead of just safe enough to believe.
If the truth is an option, why not take it? A lot of these people feel like they're swimming without any buoyancy, and they had to grasp onto whatever's floating by them. But what if they could swim?
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and what they can swim, they just don't know it. There's something in them that just wants somebody else to tell them what to do.
But you don't think we've always been like that? Or you do think that's a natural part of our course? It's just gone amok?
80% of us are like that. We want to be told what to do. We want to be led by the nose. We want to be said where to go and how to feel and what to believe. And I'm upset about it. I'm disappointed in it.
So for the people like the Buddhists and the authors of these books, what do you think was the difference for them?
Well, they were growing up in a culture where it was not prohibited from the time they were young, where it was understood that they owed. Every one of these cultures has an allegiance, an honoring of the previous people who came before them. They all do. We don't. We don't do that. We plant them in the ground somewhere and go throw flowers on the grave once in a while.
Right.
We don't see their influence. We don't feel their influence. We don't honor the fact that they were alive and whatever they had left us.
We have no Day of the Dead equivalent or even close.
It's our culture. Our culture is devoid of spirituality in a real sense.
And when you say that, you mean American culture or modern?
Well, you could say it was both. Like, what was the first religion really? Worshipping nature, honoring your ancestors. Why was that not good enough? Because people wanted power. It's about power, power, power. The three most important thing in organized religion, power. And it's a crime. I see little difference between organized religion and organized crime, and that's unfortunate.
Because it's just the act of lording fear for control.
Yes, for money, for power. The way to get power in our culture is to count how much money you have,
Yeah.
how many possessions you have. You know, it's there's good books about that too. And
So
yet-
where do you think that line splits?
You know, who was it? There was somebody, Eric Fromm, I mentioned his books. The Art of Loving talks about that. A little book, 110 pages long, and talks about there is an art to loving, and that there are people who love gratitude, who love beauty, who love music, who love life, who love to encourage people. And then there are people who are the opposite, who embrace darkness, the people who like to talk about murders and who like to talk about everything that's wrong with the world and offer no assistance whatsoever to that solution, to that problem. So there are people who love life and there are people who love death. Eric Fromm refers to them as negrophiliac, meaning they love death. And I see that. When I turn on Fox News, I see it. Every single thing they want to talk about. Look at this, it's so horrible. Look, somebody got stabbed. Oh, somebody got raped. Oh, somebody got robbed.
Right.
Isn't that great? I think I spoke to this about that last time I was out here. To know something is to love something. You know, somebody once said, and it's very, very true. If you love to read, you're gonna learn. You're gonna learn. You're just gonna learn. So the love of books, that has led me to the conclusion that whatever happens here, that happens here. There'll be another one.
Yes.
When you come back, you may decide to come back as an eagle for a while.
And I can see that round.
Really, I'm serious.
I'll get that eagle eye.
I would like to be a bird for a while. You know, as long as there's no peregrine falcons lying around the place.
Yeah, sure.
Anyhow, I suggest, so I'm going to be building my own psychomendium in my house, in the space behind my home.
Very cool.
And anyone who can come and try to communicate with the dead, I mean, they're welcome to try it.
I'll try.
You know, seriously, because I'm all about helping people.
So you say you got two kinds of people fundamentally. How do you think their time in the in-between sorts out which one of those two they're going to be in the next go-round?
Every single thing they did, they will see. If they were bullies, they will be that. They won't only see themselves being the bully, they'll see themselves being the victim.
You're right.
Okay? They need that lesson. Whatever it was they didn't do right, they need that lesson. They need to see what they did wrong. There's always, I guess the theory is there's always hope for people, and that the soul is much higher, much more integrity than any particular human body. The body has limitations. The body might not have had enough food when it was younger. The body might have problems with this, problems with that. The body is the limiting of the fact that the body is the test for the soul.
Yes. Yeah, that's a prevalent idea.
That's it right there.
So do you find, I guess this kind of goes without saying, but I want to get it out there, that the soul portion of the show, for lack of a better word, is non-local. We're just here in this right now.
Oh, God, yeah.
Okay.
It's hard to see this as a temporary thing. But the older you get, the more quickly time seems to pass.
Right.
And you become aware that this wasn't long enough. I didn't have enough time to do everything I wanted to do. And you actually want to come back. You want to take another shot at it. Because Earth is a very tough place to live. When you read enough of these books, because we are interdimensional creatures. We just don't know it. The minute we die, we're in another dimension.
Right.
We are interdimensional creatures.
That's a lot of that talk of the fourth dimension. If there was a door that opened to the fourth dimension where time and space had been superseded, you wouldn't know and you wouldn't see what was on the other side.
You could play with that forever.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I think it's fascinating. These guys spend their whole lives in school trying to learn all these theories, and then 10 years later, they throw it out in the trash can and start all over again.
Yeah, right. This was string theory.
The utility of it all.
Yeah.
String theory, oh my God.
Yeah, this
like
was
a
all those ones that got the fate of Old Yeller in the end.
How many different outcomes could we have?
Yeah, right. So in this circumstance where we've got a presumed non-local spirit, soul, whatever you want to call it, and this body that we're riding in, is it your opinion that with enough self-discipline or determination or clarity or whatever adjective you want to stick on it, the soul is actually the one in control?
That's the challenge the whole time. That is you have to have your soul control your body rather than the other way around. Or you might find up being a substance abuser or be somebody who likes to hurt people or a sadist or somebody who steals or someone who lies and cheats. The challenge, if you're given a bad body, it's really a challenge. It's a challenge. But if you overcome that challenge, then you've gone up a little in rank.
Right.
They refer to colors so much in these books, and in between your energy. And we know that you can take matter and turn it into an enormous amount of energy, right?
Right.
E equal MC square.
Yes.
It refers to that. But they talk about the opposite, that if you put enough energy together, you can create matter. And they're talking about life, birth, creating a new body. All that energy creating matter. It's fascinating. The whole thing's fascinating. And I'd like to get into Buddhism a lot more until I really thoroughly understood it.
Right.
I would like to research the other world. I want to see if I could talk to the dead.
I do too. You or me, either one.
Yeah, well, you come over, you spend you get a little time and play some soft music.
Yeah.
You know, music is universal,
Amen to that.
truly universal.
Yes.
You know, and I'm hoping that they before I die, they'll come and get me, let me play up there. You know,
There you go.
get a gig.
So how much of this do you see as what's holding us back at the moment? And do you see a time when something like this or these types of ideas are going to be able to make any inroad into even secular thought?
You know, lately I've been depressed about it because people seem to be backsliding,
Yeah.
and that's true. And they're becoming more primitive, more tribal. Even the prevalence of everything you see about them, they want to have as good a time as possible. They don't care if it's meaningful. It's like, let's have a good time.
And it feels like people have become increasingly standoffish, like we're getting a little bit more territorial,
Yeah.
a little bit more tribally.
I think the phones have a lot to do with that. I think we're going to need a renaissance. We're going to need a renaissance where we throw our phones away and we say, okay, and we become hippies and we create communes again and we grow crops.
I was just going to say, grow food.
We grow food and we don't allow the damn phone on the property.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to see the new Amish, you know, who knows?
Yeah, right.
We need that. The old Amish are using the e-bikes, by the way.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting endeavor.
We need an awakening. We need a renaissance. We need a movement.
So how do ideas like this proliferate in your vision so that we can maybe even inch closer to a time like that before we run out of sunrises and sunsets?
Well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. We're going to realize sooner or later that we've been held back by the religious dogma, that there's a whole universe out there we were not aware of, that there is that the Buddhists in Tibetan Buddhists were right. There is a between. You do come back again. You do try to learn from the first trip. You do try to learn from each body. That's what needs to go out there. And we're just beginning to peel back the layers of falsehood on the Christian myth. And there's so much of it that's a myth. And I don't even want to go into the other religions because they want to kill you too.
Right.
The fact that you
And
want
each other.
Well, yeah, if you want to kill somebody because they don't agree with you, then you don't really believe in what you're doing, do you? You have to murder somebody to convince yourself you're right, you know?
That's taking it far beyond the step of trying to convince them.
Yeah, you know what the other original sin is? Misogyny.
Yeah? What do you think? Why do you feel that way?
Religion was, I feel very strongly that organized religion was put in place so that men could continue to be superior beasts.
We still see that in some religions.
And lord over women. Yeah, and that is a big mistake. That is an indication that your civilization it's got one hand tied behind its back and that you're hanging out in the dark ages, okay? You're going medieval. How you treat your women is everything. And religion is used. It's used as a tool to suppress women.
And
that-
strong arm power in general.
And that's the original sin, what they do to women. But it's caused by organized religion.
So do you feel like people that, because I've been around a fair amount of people who are staunchly religious, and I you know, I kind of I'm a live and let live, even though I personally tend to have my own skepticism. How do you think there is any way to even approach this? Because it's such a mutually exclusive world. It can't be that we go to heaven and hell and we get judged by somebody at a gate if it's, I've been here before and I'll be here again.
Yeah. None of that makes any sense.
Right.
That they would judge somebody who was, let's say, mentally not able to worship a particular religion. They're going to send them to hell.
Right.
Seriously. That, yes or no, that whole thing has to go. Certain things are going to happen that are going to blow people's minds. Because if reincarnation is real, you can prove it. And it's the proof is there. They're afraid to look at it.
That's what I'm saying. The proof is
They are
at
afraid
least
to look at it.
anecdotally compelling.
Yes, but they have such a high standard for what they consider proof because of their own prejudice. Because their implied prejudice makes them give you it's like in Texas, you can have an abortion. Under what circumstance? Yeah, right. They didn't make it so it was possible.
Right, exactly.
A lot of these things are not made to be possible. Somebody has to teach them that reincarnation is real. Because as soon as you do that, this whole thing about controlling people, it all starts with denying reincarnation. Every one of these men of the clergy, no matter who they are counting on the fact that you're listening to them and only them. The minute you realize the truth, that your people who came before you are still trying to talk to you, that you are part of them, that you're going to see them again, none of that means jack anymore.
Right.
They've lost everything. It reminds me of Dr. Max Gerson, who was curing cancer in the 40s, and the doctors were saying, we have to get rid of him, he'll ruin us. People can do it on their own. They can stand on their own. They just need to get educated. They need to get groups together that build psychomediums. Maybe they need to read the right books. And I don't even know how a person reads that book every damn day. How do you do that? Have we become stupid?
Most don't, I think, would probably be.
Have we become stupid?
Well, I think I'm more on the train that I think we've become a little bit complacent to be put favorable,
Right.
Lazy probably to be put a little bit more rigidly.
Well, we're listening to the wrong people. We need to get people out there ahead of all this. The first of all,
But who are the people that can make those inroads?
you know what's funny about that? But we look up the pop culture figures so much.
Right.
What would the aliens say about that? You know, how do you explain all these worshiping? That same God gene that I think occurs in people is worshiping Taylor Swift. That same God gene is worshiping Donald Trump. The same God gene is overactive. It's like a kid with acne. It's going crazy, you know, and they're worshiping everybody. Stop it already.
Yeah. What do you think is rooted our propensity in that?
I don't read enough.
But I mean, that was even sort of the bait for Christianity. You know, you can worship this, but then don't worship anything else.
Christianity said, you will only read this.
Yeah.
If you read anything else, we're going to burn you at the stake.
Right.
And they burned children at the stake.
So
You know that? They did that?
Well, I guess if you're going to be that staunch, you
They
can't.
did that.
Anakin killed the
In
younglings.
the name of God.
You
What
know?
does that remind you of?
Yeah.
Some things ever change.
Right. And that's kind of where I'm big hooked on this. How do you make an inroad into something that needs to change but hasn't for so long? Or maybe I shouldn't say needs to change, but could quite possibly benefit from changing. That hasn't for so long.
Where is the enlightenment, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Where is the enlightenment?
Yeah.
You can only hope that people come out and they tell the truth and they make people aware they don't need to have organized religion. They make people aware that it's a con game, that they have the power themselves, and atheism doesn't work. Our power is beyond our power. There are things beyond our understanding. We are just part of the game. We are not the game itself. Think of how many different things. Look, I have this discussion with my wife about, we have a brother who liked to hunt, always liked to kill things. And I said, no, I don't think it's right to kill things. I said, well, he eats it. Well, okay, well, that's just like putting a Band-Aid on it. It's not right. He didn't have to kill it. There's a consciousness. I think that we should all become Tibetan Buddhists, if you want to know the truth. We should be exposed to other religions. We don't know that. Oh, my God. Okay, you want an example of that? Mm-hmm. I'm at a party the other day. I got a realtor I bought a house from, and I mentioned to him the persecution that Christians have always persecuted the Jews, and he didn't know that. And I had to what?
Yeah, how large of a rock do you need to live under for that one?
Well, he was saying that's Islam, and I said, no, Christianity killed millions of Jews.
They were the OG Jew killers. They did it first.
They had a name for it. Nomenclature. Oh, nomenclature. I tried to read. What the fuck are they talking about? Can't get it.
Yeah.
The nomenclature, deity, Godhead, this, that. And you try, he's the son, he's the brother, he's Mary, oh my God. Mary Magdalene, by the way, we should have read her book because she had an affair with Jesus. I mean, they were lovers. Apparently they had kids. Why can't we have the real Jesus? Why do we have to have Superman?
Good question.
When did he become Superman? And if you read any of those myths, the whole thing about the virgin birth, the two wise men, he died on a hill, repeated over and over again.
And the flood and all of it.
Even with Moses and the kid who was a baby in the Nile in a basket, that story was told before by the Sumerian text 1,500 years before. So, they just rehashed this stuff. Even the Jews did it. My own people did it. But Moses had access to the Royal Library of Alexandria before it was destroyed.
By the Romans?
By the Christians.
Okay.
They might have been Romans too.
Because I know
the early church destroyed the Library of Alexandria.
Yeah, because I know there's a lot of semantical things there where a lot of or certain groups of people will try to obfuscate some Christian responsibility onto Romans at the time and act like they were either not
Pontius Pilate.
Yeah, exactly.
There was no mention whatsoever of Jesus by the people who were writing at the time. Philo. I know, it's like a thing you eat, right? It's a Greek thing.
Yeah.
Philo of Egypt was a chronicler of the time. He wrote everything about the time. He was in Egypt. He's next door. Not a word about Jesus. Paul never met Jesus. These people, it doesn't wash.
Right.
And even the cross, oh my God, they have found a heel bone. They have found a palm bone. They know he wasn't put on a cross. Besides, they didn't have manufactured lumber back then, for Christ's sake.
Yeah. Bill Hicks has a great joke about the cross. He said, do you think when Christ comes back, he really wants to see a cross? He says he looks down there, he says, Dad, they're still wearing crosses. They don't get it yet. I'm not going.
Do you remember that? Do you see the Blues Brothers? They go to see the nun.
Yeah.
And they're going up the stairs in this thoroughly dilapidated old church.
Yep. And
there's a giant crucifix of Jesus hanging over the stairway, life size, beam and everything. Would it be upsetting for them if they realized that Jesus was crucified on an X, not a cross? The actual evidence is it was an X. But you can't wear jewelry like that. For the jewelry to hang right, it's got to be a cross.
Right.
How are you going to hang an X? You can't hang an X. But they didn't take the time to hoist people all the way up there. It would take 3 or 4 guards to do that.
No kidding.
They had a lot of work to do. We have 12,000 people we got to hang today. We got to put up on. And even the words in the original text describe a tree, not a cross. They can't get any of that right. It's a myth. And the truth of the matter is they'd be much better served by knowing the truth. Okay, that there is a power beyond yours. That's okay. You're not the end of everything. You're not the center of the universe, okay?
Thankfully.
In fact, you were told in the Old Testament that this planet is for you to take care of, not you own it. You made that. You translated that. You took the New Testament and said, you own this planet. You take what you want. The original Jews, you know what they said? You are stewards of this planet. Yep. You are stewards. So Christianity comes along and says, hey, you want to take it. You know, and I like the success of Christianity was based on no circumcision, and they had bacon, and that's why Christianity succeeded. Bacon and the lack of circumcision, right there.
Bacon
You on that
bacon
note.
is a powerful persuasive
Oh my
tool.
God! You put bacon and put anything, it's better. The only thing is because it has pastrami, by the way.
Yeah. Well, they make beef bacon. I heard that's no reasonable substitute, though I haven't tried it.
It's got to be a pig.
Yeah.
For some reason.
So I know this is a conversation that we can absolutely expound on, and I know we're going to have a part 3 where we're going to get into aliens, but let's do part 2, something simple, maybe something fun. What's the next book you got on the horizon? What's the next thing that's really intriguing you? Because I know when you latch onto something, it's something meaty. So I'm curious, what's the next meaty round for you?
Well, I had this really giant book at home that I got because it's Albert Einstein's favorite book. And I had to read that book. And it may change me, it may not, but it's very thick. It's like the New York phone book. And but Madame Blavatsky is who wrote this book. And it was Einstein's favorite. And I'd also like to see if I could create this psychomandium and get people to come over and you know, if I could just get 1 out of 3 who has an experience that changes their lives, I would feel like I had done something.
Well, I'll 100% guinea pig. You got me on camera. I'll 100% guinea pig.
But when you read these things, anybody who goes through this and touches the past or touches the other world, they're always made better by it.
Yeah. It's supposed to be an unexplainable comforting.
It is. You're not worried about dying as much. That's the main thing.
I've had 4, debatably 5, how you want to categorize them, NDEs in my life. So right now, I live like that.
Were you able to see the room from above in each one of them?
Only one time did I have
Did you go out
a
that
memory I
day?
brought back from outside of my body.
Well, did you feel like the memory was there, but it was wiped out?
More or less.
It is. You're not supposed to remember it. You're not there yet.
And my stepfather had an aortic aneurysm, and that's not something you normally survive from. And he was in a surgery for 13 hours, and he
Took a trip, didn't he?
very much so. And he can describe it all very clearly. And one of the most poignant things about it was when he first came back, he was not entirely conscious. And he spent a couple of weeks like that, and then he was in ICU for a while after that. But he kept asking where all his friends were, everybody he saw. And he had names, and he could describe faces.
That's his soul group.
He knew it completely. Right. And he wasn't a man who had a proclivity to want to make up an experience like that.
It. But see, that's a common denominator, once again, that adds to my list. There's another hit. And the preponderance of evidence is that we come back and we are responsible for what we do.
Amen to that.
There is none of that, I'm doing it for you. I'm your golden ticket. That I worry about. That aspect of Christianity, you can do whatever you want. You'll be forgiven as long as you believe in me. You can say whatever, you can say the
You
right
can
word.
repent at the last second.
Yeah. Oh, see, why would you tell people that?
Right.
That's crazy.
Right.
I mean, I know you want the power that gives you. Oh, okay, here's your golden ticket. Here, take the host. But it's crazy. You got to be responsible for yourself, for what you do to people.
Amen.
That's the way forward, right there. Be responsible for yourself. Compassionate intelligence is what the Buddhist Tibetans call it.
That's it.
Compassionate intelligence.
Well, compassionate intelligence and personal responsibility is great things to hang our hats on.
And we all need to spread as much love as possible. That's the first requirement.
I'm in.
We cannot, if we see somebody who needs help, we help them. And we help them see the right way.
Well, I look forward to conversation 3, and I'll enjoy it as much as 1 and 2. I appreciate you coming down here, and we're spreading love one conversation at a time, my friend.
Bless you.
Thank you, Dennis.
Take care.